Well. So did you guys have fun? You're starting to loosen up a little bit, but I did walk around. There's a couple things I want to point out. One, to our friends from Japan, I realize making hand gestures is impolite in Japan, but that's why we do it in America, too. Remember, when you're talking in front of an audience, your job is not to be polite. That's not your job. Your function is to educate and to entertain. And part of that means you're going to have to break society's rules. I certainly do a lot of things that are not considered polite by any means. But that's one of the reasons why I'm probably one of the highest paid public speakers and have been for years. Short of a president who gets $1,000 a plate. Imagine if every time you ate you had to give me $1,000. Plus... And these presidential plate dinners, they don't even give you good food. That's really lame. $1,000 and they give you something that looks like chicken. But other than that, or Henry Kissinger, if you ever get a chance to see Henry Kissinger speak publicly, he's fabulous. I saw him at the 75th anniversary of the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco. The Commonwealth Club are all the really wealthy, conservative, tight asses. And I joined the club 20 years ago. And that means I couldn't pass it up. These are the people I would never, ever get to meet otherwise. These are people who own banks, and stuff. But having been a member for so many years, on the 75th anniversary, they sent out things to see Henry Kissinger and Shirley Temple Black speak. And I couldn't pass it up. So my wife and I went, and it was a black tie. And I did have a black tie. I had a black string tie. But my wife and I both dressed inappropriately, and my wife got all dolled up and put on something that looks like it comes out of a movie that witches would be in. And we went in, and there were all of these debutantes, in pink chiffon dresses and guys in these tuxedos. And I used to have a tuxedo, but it doesn't fit me anymore, so I figured, what the hell, I'm not going to buy a tuxedo for one night. And I said, if I stand out, who cares? So I wore a white suit. And it's a nice white suit. It doesn't belong to me. It belonged to somebody else. I just borrowed it. Put on my white suit, so I kind of had that different look, so that everybody was all dressed in black and I was dressed in white. That way and anyway, based on your seniority, and since lots of older people had died, I somehow or other had moved up from being in tables in the back to being in one of the tables in the second row. And sitting at the table with me is a guy who owns 2 banks and an armored car company. And there was another guy there that was a CEO of a company and owned all the stock in a company that makes spaghetti or something. And this guy's wife, and we were there, and there were these other people at the table. They were all... Now, one of the guys, I really wanted to have a stethoscope to find out if he was alive. I mean, he sat down at the table, and he went like this. He went... And his wife was just talking, and she was talking about this with the other guy's wife, the guy who owned the bank's wife, and they were chatting away and talking about things and showing each other diamonds that were this fucking big and stuff, of which my wife was very interested. And I told her, no, don't look at those. And she went, those are pretty, And Shirley Temple came out, and she talked a little bit, and, because she doesn't dance anymore. And I have to admit, I really was thinking of asking for my money back. But she just finally, she said that she really worshipped Henry Kissinger, and she said she wanted to cut her talk short, and everybody applauded, which you should take as an indication about something. But anyway, it was in this hotel in the Fairmont, and they had the podium on the stairs, where the stairs come down, and then they go two ways, and they put the podium. It's kind of like a stage. And then she introduced Henry Kissinger, and he came from the top of the stairs, and as he came down, he sang on a Good Ship Lollipop and danced down the stairs. And what was so great is that all of these old farts in this place stood up and started singing with him and dancing, except the one guy at my table who is still like this. And that's when I started to worry about when I asked his wife, I said, is he okay? And she said, oh, he's always like this. And I said, even when you first met him? And she said, yeah. And I said, wonder what he does for a living. I could get that job. I could do this. I'll wait till you find out what this guy did for a living. This was the major surprise. This guy was a brain surgeon. He's always like that? Yes, he was apparently, they said he was one of the top brain surgeons in the country, but he was retired now, and he was just on the board of directors of the University of California system and head of the medical school, and what was the other thing? California Board of Consumer Affairs. They're the people in charge of licensing psychotherapists. I always love that name, don't you? I love that. You get to look at people, are you a psychotherapist? Or even better yet, psycho the rapist. If you actually read it, that's what it says. People give me their card, and it says, I'm a psycho the rapist. See, the idea that the state of California or that a government can decide who can work well with schizophrenics and things, pretty soon, I imagine, you're going to have a license to do public speaking, for example, because, they want to regulate everything. They're talking about this. This is one of the ones I like now. They want to get ephedra off the market. They think that only doctors should decide who can take ephedra, and because doctors know a lot about taking speed, or they couldn't work those long hours. But they're thinking that perhaps it would be a good idea if you had to have a prescription for all vitamins, because you can overdose on vitamins. You could take too much water and kill yourself. It's called drowning. You guys may have heard of it. But if you actually drink too much water, you can make yourself sick. And, it's like if you took, lots, and like when I met Linus Pauling, he was taking 5,000 units of vitamin C, like 5 times a day. And he was taking 3.5 grams of BHD. That's that stuff that they put in foods to preserve its shelf life. In the 60s, I went to Fillmore Auditorium one time with a friend of mine, and he's a couple of years younger than I am, and he comes from the whitest family in America today. I mean, there's no family in America whiter than his family. They live in a perfect house, and every time you go in, his mother is clipping coupons out of Reader's Digest. In fact, when I was in college, I had a period where I wasn't doing too well. I didn't have too much money. And his mother came over and gave me envelopes full of coupons clipped out. It was really, for stuff that I would never buy. But I had a friend that worked at the supermarket, and I swapped him for food that I would buy, stuff like coffee and more coffee. So that's what I lived on in college, coffee. And then I had 2 girlfriends that worked at restaurants, and I ate in those all the time. She would tear up the tracks. Unfortunately, they weren't really good restaurants. One was a Denny's, actually. Hey, I got news for you. When you're hungry, Denny's looks really good. It's like if you have a lot of money and you think you go out of here and you go, shall I eat at Denny's, or shall I eat at Pizza Hut, or shall I eat at IHOP, or do I have a car? I noticed some of you trucking over, and the first day you were real happy to go over there, and by the 3rd day you guys were looking across there going, is there any other thing fucking around here I can eat? I don't know if the Japanese people would like it, but there is a good Japanese restaurant as far as I'm concerned, but I don't know, by Japanese standard it might be a Denny's as far as I know. But it's a few blocks down the street, and it's they're quite fancy. It's run by this Japanese guy, and a couple of years ago, actually it was several years ago. When I turned 50, John threw a party for me at this place because my birthday came during the seminar, and we went down and he rented a private room, and my wife went out and had a cake made at this place that had a computerized thing. So you give them a picture, and it makes it unfrosting on the top of the cake. It's really a good idea, actually. I thought it was trivial. So she went down to some pagan place and got this card that was of this goddess and all these little intricate things. I mean, it would have been the most complicated thing if you'd have done it by hand. You would have been frosting that thing for 5 years. But this computer thing went and printed it out on the cake. And then, since it was my surprise party, she had me bring the cake down earlier and put it in the refrigerator. So I went down in the afternoon, and I knocked on the door, bang, 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 and this Japanese guy came up to the door, looked through the glass like this. And I said, the cake in the refrigerator. So he went, go around back. So I went all the way around. This is a huge restaurant. I mean, it took me like a week to get around to the back. And it was really hot out, and I'm going, this cake is going to melt. My wife's going to kill me. Some birthday this is. And I go around to the back, and he has the door open, and he goes in, and he looks at me, and he goes like that. And I said, my wife called and said she was going to put a cake in the walk-in thing. And he goes, oh, yes, someone else's cake. You could see he didn't really approve of the concept. And then I set the cake down, and I opened up the box, and he looked in it, and he stepped back, and he went, this is the most beautiful cake I've ever seen. And he suddenly started barking out orders to people, and he had them clean a shelf out inside the walk-in, and he put the cake in there and displayed it, and he had everybody come and look at it. He was totally fascinated with it. And he said, where did you get this cake from? And I said, I made it in my hotel room. I could see he was not amused. He looked at me, and he went, no. He said, where is it? So I told him the name of the place. It's a bakery out in the other side of town. And he said, and this cake is for a birthday. He said, it's a surprise party. And I said, yeah, it's for me. And he said, how can it be a surprise party for you if you're bringing the cake? And he said, well, I'm not good at remembering things. See, and it's an advantage a lot of the time, by the way, because, by the time I got back to the hotel, I was going, where have I been? And I came in, and I taught my little section in the seminar, and John had another cake that somebody brought in, and they gave pieces to the participants, and I thought, I went to get that cake. And John went, no. And I went, I know I've been somewhere, but where is it? Now, I know that when they brought me down there, see, because I'm really good at amnesia, and amnesia is something everybody should learn to remember about. Because the more you remember what it is that it means to forget things, the more you can forget what you don't need to know and remember what you do. For example, where's my college professor I was talking to outside? Okay, I walk outside, and he's telling a story about a train going down the track. And I'm standing by there, and he goes, and the train made the whistling sound. And I went, and he went, looked at me, and I went, the whistling sound? And he went, yes, the whistling sound. And I said, make the whistling sound. And he made make the whistling sound. See, it did pretty good. Although I've never quite heard a train that sounded like that. So I thought, well, maybe I should teach him something about noises, because noises are really important anchors, especially if you're going to color up your speech. Part of the reason we make movements, like, when you talk about climbing up a ladder, right? It helps, if you make movements that are like a ladder. When you talk about doing things like slapping somebody across the face, if you don't make the movement, it doesn't do things, but you should also make the sound so that it makes the sound with it. I asked him, I said, what sound does an elephant make? Right. Which brings me to my point. I think we need some work on sounds. Because I don't know, when I was in India, I went to where they had elephants, and I never heard one of them that sounded like that. You know how the elephants are. Woo! Being human beings, we have the ability to make all kinds of sounds. There isn't an instrument that doesn't exist, but you see, part of you have to do is you have to shape your mouth like what the sound comes out of. And, so that when you think about the difference between a drum sound, that you have to use your tongue so that you make sound, so that you do things like helicopters. Like, how are you going to make a helicopter sound? Helicopters are pretty easy, except you have to put this back here. This is radio news. We got a traffic report for you on the Weather Channel. It says if you look down, there's a lot of police down there. They seem to be shooting at a helicopter. Your ability to create sounds and to realize that the human body itself is an instrument. Your ability, if you listen to elephants, I know you can tweak that so it sounds more like an elephant. But even with the sound that you made, it's close enough that people can hallucinate and to begin to fill things in. The more representational systems. Like I found out when that music is an important part of the experience for me. I mean, that certainly people in churches know that. But like when I first started working with depressives, I used to say, now, tell me all about your depression. For example, we got another one here. There's one. I used to play this in my office when I had people who suffered from anxiety. I just let it play in the background and put them in the waiting room. Then I'd be late like 45 minutes. Because you see, the rhythm of your voice, some of you still aren't really listening when you talk. You let your nervousness turn into energy, and you have nervous energy. Take the feeling, pull it out, turn it around, and spin it the other way. Make it into enthusiasm, so that you start to really listen. I noticed some of you are starting to get basal again. I don't want to pick anyone out in particular. Because, you see, if you forget what you're doing, you forget to keep your head on your shoulder. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And to keep the tone and the tempo even and smooth, so that there is a rhythm inside your voice, so that while you're talking, you can begin to use that rhythm to make changes. So that while you're speaking about anything, whether you're talking about a train and its whistle. Do you feel how it's missing? You need something that makes a sound in there. Even if it's just anything, even if it's wrong, at least make some sound and use the sounds so that you can do them. Because when you talk about people sleeping, a little yawn goes a long ways. If your own internal dialogue doesn't have a yawn in it, then the nervous energy of the person who's anxious about things won't begin to relax. And it is inside focused relaxation that you get people's attention. It's important to get people to laugh. It's important to realize your hands don't have to move at all moments, even if you're Italian. It's moving and stopping that creates difference. In all things, it's being able to whisper and to talk really loud that creates difference. You don't want something that's smooth and unnoticeable. You want discrepancies. It's the suddenness of your change that elicits powerful responses. You want to be able to make sure that when you create anchors visually, you create them precisely. When you're selling devices, even if you don't have them, you want to relate to them as if they're real. When you tell people about a new model of tennis shoes that's coming out next week, and about how they're smooth and softer and you can bounce higher, you want to be able to use your gestures so that it creates big pictures in their mind. Remember, it's not the air that's important, it's what goes inside their heads. So that your own movements, every one of them needs to be precise. Some of you still weaving a little bit like the snake when you talk. If If you're going to do that, at least use a snake lisp. You guys all saw The Jungle Book. The snake in the Jungle Book talks with a lisp. Because of its tongue, I guess. I don't know. But whatever it is that you're describing, you need to be able to learn to hold still. Practice it while you're here so that you can keep your hands still, and then when you move them, it will be that much more powerful. That when you talk about pushing something deep inside yourself, make sure that when you use the word deep, it sounds like it. Your tonality. Let your tonality go downward more often. Practice a little while you're at lunch. The only thing you need to hear yourself is your own ears, so that you listen to the sound of your voice, so you can practice. Make downward movements. Go, now you can. Try the word relaxed. Now, how many of you were too nasal? If you know you were too nasal, try it this way. Breathe in, remember where your diaphragm is, and relax and go, relax. Yeah, that's better. Snaky, very snaky. Because if you go relax with a little hiss at the end, poor people, like the word now in English really flows off your tongue. You go, now. Now, where's the Germans? You guys end that word with a T, don't you? Yeah, and you can't slide those T's unless you go, get that snaky thing going. Because it doesn't matter which language it is. It matters how much creative you have with your own language. Because you can take lots of liberty. I don't pronounce words in English correctly. The poor translator has been going nuts. She keeps coming up. She told me today I was doing better. She said, you're getting more organized. You're better. I just know how to deceive her better. That's all. Because I even put words inside of words. When I'm talking, I'll say a word like hello, but I'll go, hello, sleep hello. And most of the time, people don't even hear it. I tell, a lot of times I'm talking and I go, look, I stop and I say to yourself, this is incredibly interesting. And I'll watch and people go, oh, this is really interesting. Because most people don't really hear. In fact, the first day, you have no idea how much of this I was doing. But I kept trying to train your ear, because the more you hear what's going on, the more control you have of it. Now, some of you were trying to do the biggest mistake of all. When you got up to tell your stories, you tried to think while you made the old sound, So you went, If you're not ready to speak, don't. Okay? Let the silence hang like a delayed pregnancy. You know, because any of you have had kids, man, when it goes longer than it's supposed to, the women suffer, but the guys go through the ceiling. You know, we go, you promised me it was 9 months. It's now 9 months and 5 days. What's going on here? I don't think I can stand, because you plan your stress ahead of time, you know. And when it goes longer, there's only so much stress left. And there's only so much that you can take. To me, once you begin to outline for yourself, because you see, you get the chance of planning what you're going to talk about ahead of time. My recommendation is that you don't talk about things you don't know about. Talk about what you know best. There is every bit of resource in your own life. Now, I'm lucky in the sense that I got all these weird clients over the years, so I have great stories. But when I literally challenged all these psychiatrists and said, look, send me something that's incurable. They started out sending me things which I considered to be easy. Phobias are easy because fear is something that is a real anatomical response. It's part of the fight-flight reaction. And since most mental patients aren't in a position to run away, getting them to fight for themselves is pretty easy. I mean, when you got somebody locked up in a room and you own a research and development company like I did, so I have physicists, I have technicians, I have all these people. We could go in and redo their rooms. I mean, when somebody was talking to the devil, it's one of my favorite stories, is the guy Charlie. Because Charlie was one of those really sweet paranoid schizophrenics, the kind you really feel sorry for, you know, because they come in and they're just, you know, they're not necessarily afraid of you, but he would come in and he would just be shaken like a leaf. And he'd jump. You could do anything. If you slapped a table, he would like have his claws up in the ceiling. But he was terrified and constantly always looking out the window. And I finally asked him, I said, you keep looking out the window. I said, we're on the 3rd floor. What are you expecting to find? And they had told me that he was talking to the devil, that the devil came and talked to him at night. And to talk about secondary gain, the devil always said bad things about his psychiatrist and the nurses. And when the psychiatrist would come in, he would go, the devil told me you're his and you're going to burn in hell. And the psychiatrist would go, oh, more drugs, give him more drugs. That'll clear his mind up. Now, we tried that on the streets where I grew up, and I never found that taking more drugs cleared anybody's mind up. At least as far as I can remember. See, we tried if somebody was freaking out on LSD, giving them more LSD, and it didn't seem to help. I know a lot of the heroin addicts would be jonesing, and if they took more heroin, they would relax, but then they just need more later on. Now, when you have somebody who tells me point blank, as matter-of-factly as anybody has ever said anything, he looked me straight in the eye, and I said, how do you know it's the devil? And I don't think anybody ever asked him that. He kept saying it was the devil. Everybody kept saying it wasn't. And he said, I know it's the devil because he has horns. And I said, well, if I came in tomorrow and I had horns, would I be the devil? And he said, no, you're too short. And I said, I beg your pardon? And he said, yeah. I said, the devil is about 60 feet tall. He said, his face is the same height as the window. And I pulled out my crib notes and I went, that face, same height as window. And I said, and what color is he? And he went, red. And I went, red. Of course the devil's red. I've seen that cartoon. Okay. And I said, and what does that sound like? Does he speak perfect English or is he speaking Japanese? What language does that devil? He goes, well, I imagine the devil can speak any language. And I said, what language does he speak to you, Charlie? And he said, he speaks in this big, booming, echoing voice. And he yells at me all the time. Tells me bad things about my childhood and the bad things I did. And he tells me I'm going to burn in a lake of fire for eternity, and he's going to peel my skin off. And he burst into tears, and he started to cry. I felt so sorry for him that I picked up the telephone, and I called the guys in my lab, and I said, break out the truck. And they said, what do we need? I said, hydraulics. We need a big laser. We need a smoke machine. And the guy on the other side said, oh, it's the devil again. Some things just get redundant, you know. But the next day, they took Charlie out of his room, which is not the easiest thing to do with a paranoid schizophrenic. They don't like leaving their room. But there are times they have to leave their room to eat meals, and only we didn't bring him back after the meal. We took him in and strapped him down to a table and brought him into the room where they give you an electric shock treatment. And he was screaming bloody murder because he'd had shock treatments. And when we brought him in that room and we sat him there, I said, now I want you to think about what you've done. And he said, what did I do? And I said, I want you to think about what you've done. I said, because this is going to be the most important day of your life. And I took the paddles out and I went together like this. And I set it on, I didn't set it up that high, just a little bit. And I went and shocked the psychiatrist. And he didn't expect it either, boy, let me tell you. You'd think they'd know after a while, you know. I'd gotten this same guy about 5 times on different things, but still, you know, he was on the other side. He's going, I'll play along with you, Richard. And when I got him and he jumped back and he went, ow, why did you do that? You know, and I went, and he tried to get out of the room and I moved around like this. And Charlie was there. He goes, what the hell is going on? And I went, ha, you're getting closer. In the meanwhile, my guys are in Charlie's room making a few adjustments. For example, we wanted to watch Charlie, so we put in a camera so we could watch. In the room on either side, we put speakers against the wall, big, giant speakers, so we could make the ground rumble. I mean, they were flat against the walls. And then because I had pre-recorded the sounds I wanted, I took my sock off, put it over a microphone, and recorded it being dragged slowly across the couch. Right? Then I took the speed of that tape and I cut it in half. So it was in slow motion, and it sounded like ice cracking on a glacier. I mean, deep rumbling sound. We also adjusted the drawers so they had hydraulics in the back of them. We adjusted the bed so that it had some hydraulics in it. My guys were very good at this. They'd done it before. Highly qualified, all PhDs, rejected from other places of business because they couldn't seem to show up to work on time. They weren't properly motivated. But given something that was fun, they were properly motivated. Then the moment of truth came. The sun set. And as the sun went down, one of my guys rolled a wagon out into the middle of this field and put the smoke machine on it. You stick celery in the smoke machine and it blows smoke out. And we use the smoke because laser, when it's shot, if it doesn't hit something, you can't see it. We purchased from Edmund Scientific a big hologram of the devil. Big, nasty-looking devil. One of these things looked like it came off of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, even though that show wasn't around yet. Could have been the same artist that did it. Hideous face with big gleaming teeth and giant, hideous, demonic eyes. And we projected this laser up into the smoke, right? So it was there, but it was about 30 feet away from his window. And he was just going to sleep. You know, he didn't sleep well. But instead of giving him his normal sleeping pills, we switched them for caffeine tablets. So he was really kind of having trouble going to sleep. And all of a sudden, a bright light shone through the window. White, the whitest white you've ever seen. Krypton laser. Beam bouncing off of the top of the truck. A guy's holding a bathroom mirror up there, shining the light into his window. And suddenly the steel bars that are locked on the third story open by themselves. Charlie sits upright. Now, we're actually in the next room controlling all of this stuff, watching him on cameras, trying not to laugh too hard. Because when Charlie sat up, he went, "What the hell?" And suddenly the bed lifted up and began to slowly turn around in a circle. We got a thing from a barber shop. That's all we could come up with on short notice. But the look on his face was absolutely priceless. Because as the bed rotated, see, I saw The Exorcist. I know how this is done, right? Suddenly the drawers in his bureau went bang, 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 opening and closing. And Charlie was on the bed like this, and he went, and he hit the nurse's button. You know, if you're attacked by demonic forces, the only defense you really need is a night nurse. And, man, he hit that button like you wouldn't believe, man. It was on the wall, and he was like, bang, hitting it. You know, and the bed was starting to turn, and bam, he would crawl across the bed and hit it again and hit it again. And he was screaming and screaming and screaming. And all of a sudden, from that position, he looked outside, and there it was, the big 60-foot devil. And he got off of the bed, and he walked across, and he looked out the window. And then he backed up, and then he went forward, and then he went back. And then the voice came, 2 Marshall amps up in the trees, lots of reverb. Can't do religious figures without reverb. But it was actually me, by the way, just in case any of you were worried about that. And I went, "Charlie?" And he went, "Yes." And I said, "Come to the window." And as he walked over, the guy pulls the wagon closer like this. And as the wagon moves, the smoke moves. Therefore, the devil gets closer to the window. Pure, simple science. However, the closer the devil came, the scareder he got. He was shaking like a leaf. He fucking pissed his pants. That's how scared he was. He wanted to run, but he's locked in, so he wasn't going anywhere. But as he started to tear himself across the window and run to the room, it went, "Charlie, you've been talking about me." And he went. Now, he is schizophrenic, by the way. Being schizophrenic does not mean you're stupid. Okay? He walks to the window and he goes, "You look really different." Now, this clears it all up for me, because he's not so fucking crazy that he can't tell that. And I said, "That's right. That's because I've come for the last time." And he went, "Last time?" Because that could have a couple of implications if you think about it. And he said, "Now," he said, "you're never going to mention my game ever again for the rest of your life, or you will suffer unbelievable pain and torture for all of eternity. Do you understand?" And you went, "Mm-hmm." And I said, "Now, across you'll see my book." And he looked across the room, and suddenly on the desk, a book opened and pages flew back and forth. It's done with pressurized air. Simple science. And the light was shining down on the book, and he walked across slowly. And I said, "Open the book, study the book, and spread my word everywhere." And he went, "Yes." And he walked over, and he opened the book, and it said, "Life Insurance Sales training manual. Today, Charlie is one of the top salesmen at this company. Well, they were one of my clients at one time, and they said to me, if there's ever anything we can do for you, Dr. Bandler, just let us know. And so I called up and said, I want you to hire this guy. And I said, you won't believe how dedicated this guy is. And after he went through the initial training program, I got a call from the director of training at Century 21, and he said to me, he goes, Dr. Bandler, we can't thank you enough for sending Charlie to us. He's absolutely fabulous. He's only been here 3 weeks. He hasn't even started his initial assignments, and he's already brought in so many customers. We can't even begin to tell you. He goes out every night and goes from house to house to house. This man is truly dedicated. I said, driven is the word, driven. Because once Charlie had made a deal with the devil, right, then the only problem I had left was to convince the hospital to let him out. Because I was hired by his parents. His parents didn't want him to be in there. He'd been there for 3 years, and he actually had a wife. He didn't have any children yet, but then he didn't see Milton. If he'd have seen Milton, he'd have gotten married, had children, and sent Milton presents. That was his definition of cure. My definition of cure is all around freedom. In fact, my definition of learning is all about freedom. Your ability to try new things here, you're not going to hurt anybody here. Okay? It's not going to happen, because anything you do that fucks somebody up, I'll fix, okay? You're not going to hurt yourselves. If you end up a babbling idiot, with a facial twick or something, I'll fix it for you. Don't worry about it. I do that on the last day, so try not to skip the last day. I was talking to somebody, and they said, last week, a friend of mine was in your seminar. He seems somewhat dazed, and he didn't come the last day. And I went, uh-oh. It's not good. If you're going to skip the last day, let me know ahead of time, okay? So that we can have a little conversation before you leave. Because that thing about nesting loops, I start nesting my loops on the first day, and I don't really close them until the last day. So if you skip the last day, you're going to feel... Gosh, I can't remember what it was I wasn't saying. Whatever it wasn't, it probably isn't important yet. And somebody asked me also the other question I thought I got. Somebody came up to me and they said, they were quite concerned. They said, what about secondary gain? If you don't take care of the secondary gain, doesn't it come out somewhere else? Well, that's what the psychiatrist told me originally. They said if you only treat symptoms and you suppress them, so you take your fears that you have about talking and you suppress them, then they're going to come out somewhere else. For example, you'll be a dynamic public speaker. If you suffer from bouts of impotency, your impotency will disappear. However, your penis will be erect more of the time. That's the symptom substitution, as far as I can tell. When I took the psychiatrist who had the paralyzed leg, now... The patient was fine. She was actually dancing a jig. I mean, she was dancing around. She was happy as can be. And every time he'd have trouble walking, she would laugh. And then I asked her the most important question. Because the most important question about making any changes, learning any new behaviors, learning anchoring, learning the techniques that you're here, learning to see, for example, if you're going to cure your clients really fast or close sales really quick, or what if you could go back and teach all the kids in that elementary school to spell everything in one day? Because, excuse me, I don't care how many letters are in the picture of a word, it's still just one picture. So if you teach kids to make pictures of words and look at them, make the pictures, check to make sure that the picture matches the outside, then all you got to do is hand them a dictionary. Have them look up words, and pretty soon they'll be able to spell anything. That's not a matter of life and death. Then we have to have something else to do with the rest of those 12 years. Because if you have all this spare time, think of if you don't spend time worrying, if you don't spend time being afraid, if you can actually get stuff done faster because you can make it fun and quick, then what are you going to do with all the extra time? See, this is the important question. If you're not going to waste your time gnawing on your fingers and talking to yourself, then perhaps you'll come out to your senses and begin to see and hear things that you didn't and make life easier and happier. It's the terrible thing that happens. For example, if you begin to find the strength inside you, because I already know that it's there, The strength is not in your pictures. It's not in your internal dialogue. It comes in your own voice when you listen to it while you speak. If you want to know what you're going to say, listen to yourself. You already know. The more you do this, the easier it gets. I'll tell you, begin to listen to the things that people say. If you have any doubt, let people ask questions. They'll throw it out to you. Here's a great question. I had somebody as a client. They made a film of this woman. Okay, this woman has psychotic episodes if people are late. Now, the psychiatrist that's on the film explaining NLP at the beginning actually didn't like NLP to start with. He was trying to discredit me. So he gave me 3 clients in 30 minutes apiece, and he said, we'll see if there's any noticeable change. Okay, so this woman comes in, and they don't even tell me what it is. In fact, they didn't tell me it was 30-minute tapes till we were walking in the door. They said, oh, it's the weekend. We could only get 30-minute tapes. And I said, one 30-minute tape? And they said, no, there's 30 minutes for each client. I said, what are we going to do with the rest of the tape? And he went, you'll be sorry. So this woman comes in, and she says she has psychotic episodes if people are late. But it starts like this. I said, so what can I do for you? She says the following. She goes, well, I have a problem I need to get more distance from. Now, I pretty much consider that giving it away, don't you? I mean, she pretty much said, I have a picture, and it's too close. Now, I started to think, how do you have psychotic episodes if people are late? So I asked her. I said, if I'm going to fill in for you and have your problems for you, how would I do it? See, to me, how would it be possible after being in this seminar for this many days to still talk to your fucking nose, right? And all the people listening to you haven't got the nice politeness to step up and say, you sound a little nasal. If you do it again, I'm going to slap you up the side of the fucking head. And so that if he starts to talk through his nose again, I want everybody in his group to go. So that you guys start to give each other the feedback, because it's a lot of unconscious pieces to begin to get to. The only way you can know if you're sounding too nasal when you don't intend to, because sometimes you want to be nasal, but if you're just doing it all the time, I don't care if you're from New Jersey. It doesn't matter to me, okay? I don't care if you're from Turkey or where you're from. If you're standing very still with your hands behind your back like this, because it's very Japanese, you can do that when you go back to Japan. But while you're here, try something different. You're in the land of psychosis. You're in Florida, for heaven's sakes. People are out there paying money to talk to big Muppets this tall. There's nothing you can do that will seem weird. Trust me. Okay? This is your one chance. There is nothing you can do in this town that will appear nutty. There are guys in rabbit suits going, what's up, Doc? I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm very suspicious of clowns. Aren't you guys? There's just something about clowns. People in this hidden thing with a big nose and things like that. I don't find anything funny about them. So as a rule, I made them stay away from my children when I was young. Every once in a while, I'd go to a carnival and a clown would come up. And I found that it's very easy because you can step on that big foot, right? And then when you hit them really hard, they pop back up like this. I learned that from a toy when I'm young. I can't quite place it, but the concept works for me. Because to me, the thing is there are some things you want to knock out of your way. The things that frighten you, the pictures in your head, the voices, the worry. Take the phone away from your head, put it on the receiver. Open your eyes and your ears and slow down a little bit. Remember, your internal state is the most important thing. Some of you are still talking too fast. There's no hurry. Say less words, but get more for each word you say. And remember, you're not only painting pictures, you're talking about them from the outside. You can step inside them, open the door, even if the hinges are rusty, put 3-in-1 oil and close them quickly. Because the more you use sounds and gestures, the more you realize you're creating an experience. When I worked with the schizophrenics, the reason I made the things they were hallucinating real was so that the experiences would be so vivid, they would impact them for the rest of their life. I could have discussed it with him. I could have come in and said, obviously, this is not the real devil. Because if it was the real devil, the rest of us would see him. And besides, he would have told me at breakfast. This is not going to help somebody to impact them so that they change their ways. The same thing is true about you guys. I'm trying to impact you so that you'll do things in different ways. So that when you leave here, maybe you won't be as outlandish as I'm asking you to be, because some of you work for businesses where they would fire you. Okay? But by the same token, when you change a little bit, you'll begin to discover that you have a lot more freedom. If you teach elementary school, you don't have to sound like an elementary school kid all the time. But you can begin to vary your behavior and find out how to get them to be excited about stuff and when it's time to slow down and enjoy it. Because there are some things that require deeper thought. If you have to teach kids to read and check up on them by having them read out loud, they're going to start reading with a little third grader's voice in their head. You know how many adults I meet that can't read because they're still reading with a third grader's voice? Remember, once you know what words mean, the meaning just goes in. It's not that you understand while you're reading, it's that you understand when you're applying. So if you read a math problem, the answer can come. If you face the problem of being able to communicate with people no matter what you do, whether I know some of you are managers, some of you are salespeople, some of you even teach NLP. It's a difficult thing to teach people how to switch their beliefs and their behaviors so they start off with the premise that all human beings can learn easily and quickly. There's so much demonstration that that's not the case. But it's based on the way in which we teach people, whether they're mentally retarded or they have their degree in psychology. It doesn't matter to me. I found out learning disabled people weren't so learning disabled if you taught them differently. This thing about giving children Ritalin because they have attention deficit disorder. Excuse me, I wrote the introduction to the first book on attention deficit disorder. And both me and that guy don't believe that it's inherent in children. We believe that it's a symptomatic behavior that's a symptom of the educational system. If you can't fucking pay attention to what the teacher is saying, perhaps it's not interesting. And perhaps trying to sit still and learn about things isn't the best way. Sometimes you have to stand up and do it yourself. Sometimes you have to realize it's time to be relaxed. Sometimes it's time to be tense. It's the variety. If you're always the same when you're up here, it will get monotonous no matter what you do. You've got to change your position. You've got to change your behavior. You've got to change your internal state. You have to change the volume and the tone, the frequency of your voice. You need to be able to hit high notes and low notes. You need to be able to whisper and to talk loud. And you need to create more variation while other things are going on. That's why you have another 5 fingers, so that you can begin to use them so that while you're keeping track of things that you have to do, remember the nice thing is you're never saying more than one word at a time or doing one thing at a time. So all you have to know is to be able to hear what you did and to be able to feel what you need to do next. When it comes to getting people's attention, you need to learn gestures like this one. If you say now, because if you say to people things like, well, all of you need to try new ideas, it's incongruent. You know, you'd be surprised. Even how many of you guys are still single in here? It's all right, don't be ashamed. It's not that you're left over, it's you just haven't had your turn yet. Just make sure when you marry somebody that likes you. Well, a lot of guys pretend to be somebody they're not. And then when the woman finds out who she is, she's immensely disappointed. So it's better you act like yourself, and if a woman doesn't like you, be relieved. You could be married to her for 50 years and get yelled at the whole time. It's a lot nicer to marry somebody who likes you the way you are, and then you just get to enjoy yourselves. But you see, if you see a woman and you're really interested in her, you can try to work up the courage to walk over, or you can go like this. It's easier. And she'll come over and go, yes, and you go, did you want something? Did you want something? Did you want something? I'm trying to be subtle here. But subtlety never worked for me. I tried subtlety. I studied Milton Erickson. Yes, if I hypnotize somebody for 5 fucking hours, I can covertly induce things. But I found out you don't have to do that because most people, everything is covert. Jiminy crickets, before I came along, nobody noticed accessing cues. Let's see. That's downright important. Now, if all of modern observant psychology could miss that, then they missed all this other stuff. Like people were going, they'd go, how do you feel about feeling depressed? And people would stop and go, I don't see what you're talking about. And they went, aha, resistant client. public speaking courses. I took that Dale Carnegie course. Excuse me. You know what they told me? Smile. All the time. So that makes them into something like one of these blues singers, as far as I can tell. Ever seen these big black ladies? They come out smiling and they go, life is terrible, my husband died. Somebody shot my children. I know my skin is falling off at the bones. You know. The most intelligent thing they said to me was, go out and say your name clearly if you want people to listen. And then I saw Milton Erickson give a lecture. And they put Milton out, and he had those crutches like the other guy has, only he has two of them. And he came out because he walked on this film. And after a while, he was in a wheelchair. He was older. But when he walked out, and he got on the podium, and he put one hand up like this, and the other hand, he lifted up, moved this one. He was up there. He looked out, and he went, my name is America. Phoenix, Arizona. Everybody leaned forward like this. What? And he goes, I'm going to talk to you about going into a trance. Deeply. I know some of you don't believe in hypnosis. It's not a government jargon. But when putting people into a trance deeply. And I went, perhaps this public speaking course isn't exactly correct. We will need to experiment empirically and find out the censor. So I was hired by an organization who worshipped Milton Erickson. There's a guy, S.I. Hayakawa, who was head of this organization at the time in San Francisco. And they brought me out, and I said, these people, I'd written the book Patterns, and they were thrilled with it because it had Milton's picture on the front. Looks a lot like Boris Karloff. But they said, we're giving every member of our society a copy of your books, and would you come and talk for a couple of hours? Because I only lived up the street. And I said, well, sure. I said, I'd be happy to. And so I was on the way there, and I just couldn't resist it. I just kept thinking, these people all know Milton personally? And the guy who was driving me over there goes, oh, yes. He goes, Milton's come and spoke to us many times, but, he's too old now. I guess that means so they got me instead. That was their way of saying you weren't our first choice. And he said, and kept looking at me and going, I expected you to be older. And I said, we'll have to wait a while for that. And he goes, well, we've only got 15 minutes. I said, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that one. I said, wait a minute. Suddenly I feel older. So when I walked in the door and they introduced me to people, I went, hello, it's so nice to meet you. And I went up to the front and I said, I'd like to thank all of you for having me here to talk about Milton Erickson and his work about going into a deep trance. Man, the first two rows went. And I said, yes. I said, when Milton was putting people into a deep trance, he used to stop and talk to them about the need to attend to one's needs before you close your eyes and begin to remember what it is that's not important about what you're forgetting about what you don't know, yet in the depths and the depths of trance can remember, so that the crispness of the sound of your voice, you realize, yes, you can mumble, and yes, you can talk clearly. You can use a high pitch and a low pitch. But if you're listening to the effect, you'll always notice that it is variety that's the answer. There is no right way to talk to any one audience. You need to be able to keep them on the edge of their chair so you have their attention. And when you say attention, you need to push in the right direction. Because otherwise the incongruency creates the trouble, and it's not that trouble you want. You want them to be able to realize in a matter of moments, you can create loops inside of loops. You can begin to make changes by variation. Not just variation in subject, but variation in the way you present the same ideas. The thing that Milton had, which I thought was powerful, was he could talk for 45 minutes and people would drift into trance, and he could get to notice the difference between the way it looked. Because deep trance, understanding, comprehension, and what goes into behavior all look and feel differently. And if you can get the ideas that I try to demonstrate to you over and over again as explicitly as possible, and guess when I go and give lectures and you guys will come and watch some of these things, you'll begin to notice, because if you ever go and see me do an introductory or a 1 day or a 1 hour talk somewhere, or you go and watch other people's and it's working well, maybe you should want to walk around sometimes and look backwards. Every once in a while, you guys might want to turn around and start to notice, because I'm not just talking at you. You're going to be the one doing it. And when you come up here, you're going to want to look for the same things. I try to get people to focus on the back corners of the room so your eyes have a tendency to go forward. So unconsciously you practice, because sometimes the back of that room is going to be really far away. You know, it's not just 100 people you'll talk to, or 50 or 15. Even if you're a school teacher and you only talk to 30, suddenly they'll decide you speak so well, you should talk to all the parents. And then suddenly there'll be 3,000 people there. Or you'll go to a conference. Maybe you'll find yourself writing a book on education. We have some books that haven't been written yet, and people keep coming up and asking, Richard, when are you going to write a book for elementary school kids? Well, I did. I wrote a book of fairy tales, and it's coming out next year, but it only has one tale in it. I wrote it for my grandson. I decided he should have his own book. However, it might be applicable to other people. You never know how metaphors fall or rise. Because if you can begin to realize that my expectation is that the people in this room, we have people here from Turkey, they keep asking me, when am I going to Turkey, okay? I'll be honest with you, maybe never, maybe sometime. But that's not the important question, because I know you're going back. Most of you anyway. Because, you see, when stuff happens, things will happen. And if somebody walks in the door and makes a big noise, stop. Don't make like things that are happening in rooms aren't happening. If the sound system is making horrible noises, comment on it. Always make sure that you follow the attention of the people you're speaking to so that you can guide their attention where you want to. It's part of your job. There's lots of people rowing the boat. Those are the people in the audience. They're the ones doing the work. It's only your job to steer the rudder and then to point out the sights. You're like a tour director. If you notice, your unconscious is on the left, out, side, and up. Down the street, you'll begin to notice that there are different lights and buildings, different possibilities. There are doorways of possibilities. Some of you in here will write books about things. Lots of my students over the years have written books. Try writing books about new things, okay? Frogs into Princes has been written and rewritten and rewritten. We don't need that book. What we need is content-specific books. We need books that tell people how to do math better, how to read faster. We need things for people to have painless childbirth. There's all kinds of great things that are important. Things about how to communicate between husbands and wives. What people need is help so that you can put the past behind you and put the future ahead. The best thing about the past is that it's over. You know, somebody who used to bite their nails doesn't have to worry about it, because now they're going to start to look at it and go, I don't think so. I'm not taking that shit. No more. No, a lot more. Because, you see, if you take language and you use it to make change, to give people a positive future, and this is what I'm hoping for, the foundation of the future should be your good feelings. The best thing about bad feelings is not having them. So if you have a little bit of fear left, a little bit of worry, if you find yourself being imperfect, it's all right. Because everybody already is to a certain degree. As soon as you're moving in the right direction, things will take care of themselves. If you think today, when you talk, did you feel more at ease than you did the first day? Yeah? Okay, then you're headed in the right direction. If, on the other hand, you were more stressful, stuttering more, and you felt a sharp burning object up your ass, that should be taken as an indication that perhaps you're taking this course in reverse. What I want you to do is to notice only that you're getting better, and then to wonder just how much better you can make it. Because I think it's a thrilling thing to be able to do. I've got one of the best jobs in the world, but to me, this is like my living room. You know, I mean, it really is. People say to me, this translator said, what are you going to do today? And I went, I don't know. I haven't started yet. You know, but I know what comes next. I've done this before. Trust me, John and I have done this before. It's not our first time. And always the most amazing thing to me is when I look at you guys on the last day giving your presentations. I wonder where the fuck you were when you came. Because when you come in the first day and you're nervous and you're talking to yourself, even some of you who talk every day, we got an elementary school teacher who talks every day. But, I'm sure they say to themselves, but these aren't children. Oh, so they're easy. Children are a lot more alert and discerning. If you can get it over children, you should be able to get it by adults really easy, especially ones that are inside going, I'm going to have to get up in front of these people, and some of these people are professionals. Making pictures of yourself in front of the children of the damned and being crucified, and then suddenly saying things and hearing your voice crack so that you plan ahead. Plan for success, even in your imagination. Practice. Every athlete, every person I've modeled that's exquisite at anything goes in their mind and sees themselves doing well. And when they have bad days, they don't. And I've worked with Olympic athletes. I've worked with prize fighters. You'll love this. A prize fighter I worked with won his prize fight, got to be a champion, and then told me that he didn't need my help. And then the night before the fight called and asked if I could come. And I said, I can't. I'm doing a workshop. I said, I have people that depend on me. I said, you had your fucking chance. And he said, I keep seeing myself being knocked out. And I said, that's not a good picture to be making. And he said, I can't stop it. And I said, of course you can. Do you remember the things I talked to you about? And he goes, no, I don't remember anything about our conversations. And I said, I know that you do. I said, but if you go inside and step outside, remember Muhammad Ali was, you know what he did? What a great strategy. He floated out of himself in 4 directions and watched every moment from every corner of the ring end from his own eyes simultaneously, so he knew everything before it was going to happen. He'd watch people from the back. I mean, that's really good computational skills. He slowed time down so everything was moving slowly. Good idea. And he said to me over the phone, he goes, I don't know if I can do it tomorrow. And I said, you did it before. And he said, I just can't remember that feeling of winning. And I said, you have 2 choices. Either you go back and remember the good feeling, or you may be right. And he hung up the phone, and I watched the fight. He was knocked out in 30 seconds. Poof. And they asked him what happened. He made the comment, he hit real hard. Which about Tyson pretty much sums it up, don't you think? But you see, if somebody's going to hit real hard, you should get really out of the way. That's my policy. If a guy can hit as hard as that, I think getting things in slow motion. In fact, I think you should wear a 52 Chevy if you're going to fight them. Maybe a pickup truck or something. Because you remember I told you the guy that kept calling me out and taking me out, and I kept slamming the door and making him go around in the rain? Well, finally this guy came in after the 5th time, and he wasn't going to be fooled this time. He opened the door and said, look, you go outside, he goes, and this time we're going to do it. But by now, this time, this guy's so exhausted, I could have beat the crap out of him easy. I mean, he was a big guy, but he was totally exhausted, and he was wet and shivering and just so angry he couldn't see straight. So I walked outside, and I went down, and I went out into the parking lot, and I got in my car, started the engine. As he was coming down the steps, I came driving, and there wasn't a lot of space. There was like kind of an alleyway. Went all the way out and around the building. I knew he knew the way because he'd been down there a number of times. And I threw the car into low gear and went, and I drove off. And I heard him running away going, this is not fair. And I chased him out into the street, and then I made a left-hand turn and drove away. And I know he was standing out there in the rain, and there had to be a voice inside his head that went, I'll get that guy someday. Now, his day did come, I have to admit, because I did run into this guy again. But guess which day it was? The day he was in the crosswalk, and I was in the car. And I pulled up, and he turned around, and he saw me in the car, and he went, and I went, rum, rum, rum. And I drove out, and he started running, and he kept yelling something about the light hadn't changed. I don't know. But I don't worry about such things. I knew if I was chasing him, he wouldn't be chasing me, and that was good. I didn't even have that big of a car. I had to rent a car. The rented cars are small. I have a little car here. I worry about it sometimes, sitting out there by itself in the sun. So I'm going to go visit my car. I recommend you do the same. So I tell you what, let's take an hour and a half. See, look at the clock. Is my internal clock good? It goes, ding, time. Everything is cooked. You all have an internal clock, and right now it should be telling you it's lunchtime. If it's not telling you it's lunchtime, it may be telling you it's breakfast That means you're not from this continent, you're from another place, and you haven't shifted time yet. But you're going to discover that as long as the earth is spinning, time can be moving at any speed you want to. Because if you slow things down perceptually by listening and watching even closer, the more crisp are your perceptions, the more clean will be your communication. So you all have a good afternoon. I shall see you later. Thank you.